him was sort of, chasing women, living paycheck to paycheck and whatever. None of these things are new. And so it was. I found it fun to do it. I really enjoyed hopping through his life like that. But I don't think it necessarily takes a huge leap of imagination, because all you've got to do is steep yourself in the landscape they would have been in, because everything else is just the same as it was for a kid in the 2000s, in the 1920s, probably in the 1520s, right? People have not changed that much. And the wonderful opportunity that was gifted with Spike was an interesting way to tell a life story. Because I love that. You think like, something like Forrest Gump, where, obviously the conceit there is he's essentially just sitting on a park bench telling the story. With Spike, it's it's slightly different, because this is all provoked by people coming back into his life. Now he's officially dead, but I really wanted to do that, tell a life story with with all the trials and tribulations of a quiet life, but actually an interesting life, and a far more interesting life than you'd imagine if you just passed by his crap-filled house. And I'm sure that's the case for every crap-filled house one walks past. Literally directly inspired by a school teacher I had when I was 7, who was Mr. Thorns. He was a far less gentle character than Ray Thorns is. He was definitely an old bruiser who'd been through the war and still thought in the 1980s that it was all right to take swipes at kids with rulers. But he was known as Spike, and although a bit of a rough character, he was interesting in his way. And he also, bizarrely, he hated having the nickname Spike, which was ridiculous because it's pretty innocuous. It's almost a bit of a tribute to someone to have accrued a nickname like that. Whereas if anyone dared call him Spike, you'd have a board rubber thrown at your head or something. Um, but that's where that came from. He was also, again, it's funny, isn't it? You think back to how things have changed since the 80s. He was a teacher who would, when we were 7, disappear outside during a lesson and just lean against the wall and have a cigarette. Which even the primary school teachers were doing that back back in 1987 or whatever it was. I like Stephen. He's a good character. So Stephen is his sort of nephew, who he's not seen for many years, who's quite a complex character, and who is the first to be reunited with Spike, because well, I won't spoil it, but Stephen is the first to realise independently that actually his uncle is still with us. And he's a cool guy. He was off the wall. He did badly at school, and Ray suspects that this guy lives on the verge of criminality. And as the story moves on, it turns out nothing could be further from the truth. Stephen's actually this is an enormous success. Quite why I'll leave to the readers, reading the story. But also there were lots of fun people to do. I mean, Ray's mother is a fascinating character. She, on the face of it, went out of her way to sort of break up his one attempt at getting married. But she's a complex character, and complex characters are fun to write about. If there's anything I like doing, it's studying that thing about no one's inherently bad, or in fact inherently good. We're all sort of we're all mostly good. We're all a little bit of bad, and the mystery that's fun to unpick when you write stuff about the human condition. You're not writing about crime where you're unpicking how a crime happened. What you're doing is you're unpicking the characters of people and what has led them to behave in rather funny ways that on the face of it are obnoxious and unpleasant. But you get to, if you're writing right, by the end of the story you understand these people, you understand how they got there, and you perhaps feel sorry for them. The thing that was really fun to play with there, and as Spike acknowledges himself, he says woe betide anyone above the age of, say, 75, who has to try and explain that something unusual has happened, because people just assume that he's nuts. So we have various interchanges at the hospital. We have an interchange with the doctors where he makes a sort of attempt to set the record straight. Uh, but it basically ends up with people sort of going, look, can you move along now, sir? We've got, important business to deal with. So that was sort of the yeah, that was the fun with it, really, because I think you can sort of offer a bit of insight into what it's like sort of being old, where everyone assumes that, oh, you've got something you're claiming that something unbelievable has happened, therefore you must be crazy. And so that's why he struggles quite so much. And there's part of him is not terribly keen to get back to his old life, but it takes him a good few days to reconcile why that is. But there's certainly, he's holding back slightly, and he doesn't even realize he's doing it. But I think the reader is thinking he could sort this now, and he'll just stall at the last moment. And of course, it's sort of dawning on him. It's like, actually, I hate this life. I don't know how I've ended up here, and actually here's an opportunity to be a part of something a little bit more interesting. So particularly when the love interest from all those years ago re-emerges into the story. So yeah, he's a little reluctant, but she has remained a part of his extended family, and he has avoided her for reasons that again become clear in the story. Um, Most of that is to do with self-preservation, really. Like, he knows he could have had a different life, and by not involving himself too much with the woman he could have had that life with, he's able to kind of avoid that reckoning. But it was a fun thing to write, back in when they get together in the 60s, their eventual breakup, and to have them reunited later in life with the completely different perspective that they have. In his case, a life of singledom, taking care of his mother, working very hard. He's a school teacher, so looking after the children that he's charged with. And in her case, accepting that she's had a really terrible marriage, and with all the perspectives that brings, so that as they are reunited towards the end, um, they can they're essentially they're given a second chance,